I'm Polo Sandoval in Bogota, Colombia, and this is CNN.
You are live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta in Washington. Nationwide protests going on right now across the country after the Supreme Court declares there is no longer a constitutional right to an abortion. Some of those gatherings have gotten physical. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, you can look at this video right here. This video shows a truck appearing to push through a group of protesters, injuring one person. That obviously could have gotten much worse. Police say this was after verbal confrontations between the driver and protesters. In Phoenix, a crowd of abortion rights protesters surrounded the state Senate building, banging on the glass. An official tells CNN law enforcement did use tear gas on the scene there to disperse those demonstrators. And in Eugene, Oregon, police say a crowd of protesters got rowdy. They used pepper spray to break up the crowd and arrested 10 people. As of right now, 13 states have trigger laws banning abortions in light of this ruling, and an abortion ban is already in effect in at least 6 states. Let's go to some of these protests as they're happening right now. CNN's Polo Sandoval is in New York. CNN's Camila Bernal is in Los Angeles. And let's go to Joe Johns first. He's outside the Supreme Court. I know it's been very busy outside the Supreme Court, Joe. What are you seeing right now?
It is, Jim, and this crowd has just built and built and built throughout the afternoon. Let's just take a look at this large number of people here in front of the United States Supreme Court. The speakers expressing everything from anger and shock and fear about the future. Of course, the vast majority of the people here are supporters of abortion rights. There were a few people who were opponents of abortion rights, but they got into what you called verbal altercations with some of the others, so we had a lot of back and forth here. Reportedly, the police had to intervene, but otherwise, all of this was peaceful, we're told, a peaceful rally. So speaking to people in the crowd, one of the questions, of course, is what motivates you, especially those people who came from long distances when they could have participated in demonstrations in their own cities or towns. And I talked to one woman who said, she came from Dallas, she told me that the thing that concerns her is that this is for her not just about abortion, but it's about that whole bundle of rights that come along with it, things like gay marriage and contraception. That's what some people say they're concerned about as well, Jim.
All right, Joe, and let's go to Polo Sandoval, who is in New York. Polo, what are you seeing?
Jim, it's this group of peaceful but very passionate demonstrators that have come together here at the heart of Manhattan, and many of them hearing from speakers of all generations here. We heard from a young lady a little while ago. At her age, at 14 years old, she shared with the public here that she now worries about what yesterday's ruling will mean for her tomorrow. And then we've also heard from older generations, including some women who have also have some very serious concerns. But we also have to remind viewers that New York officials, in anticipation of this, saw this coming after the leaked memo and took steps to make sure that women in New York would still be guaranteed the right to an abortion. So the message that we're hearing up on the stage here and from many of the participants is that they hope that women in other states, including those with so-called trigger laws, will hear this message loud and clear, that they stand behind them, as now there's a very uncertain future that women face across the country, Jim.
All right, Polo, thank you very much for that. Let's go to Camila Bernal. She's in LA right now. What's happening on your end?
Hey, Jim. So as you're hearing, the chant right now is, if you're not safe, neither are you. It's a similar message to what you were hearing from New York, because the message here is that they stand with the women in other states that do not have the right to an abortion. We have heard from a number of women throughout the day, some willing to share their abortion stories. There was one who told me, look, I do not regret my abortion, and all of the things I have right now I owe to my abortion. And you're seeing hearing not just women who've had abortions, but supporters, families, men who are standing behind so many of these protesters who say right now, no justice, no peace. There's a number of chants, a number of messages. You can hear it throughout the downtown area. They were protesting earlier around the streets. They started marching. We're now in front of City Hall, but really they say that they will continue to be here because they want their message to be heard. And again, that message is that they stand with other women in other states that do not have the right to an abortion. Jim.
All right, Camila, thank you very much. Thanks to all of our reporters there on the scene of those demonstrations, people definitely making their voices heard. Let's go to CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. He joins me now. Elie, people are fired up over this. And with this now left up to the states, we should note there are states, multiple states, with trigger laws that have effectively banned abortion as an end result of what took place at the Supreme Court yesterday. What happens when a woman in one of those states decides to pursue an abortion elsewhere? That is one of the many questions right now. I suppose a woman could do that. What does the law say, Elie?
Yeah, it's going to get quite chaotic, really, because pretty soon we will have about half the states that outlaw abortion and about the other half that permit and protect abortion. The thing to watch for, though, is those states that outlaw abortion may well try to extend their reach beyond their own state borders. They may try to pass laws that say you cannot pass through this state in order to get an abortion. You cannot leave this state and cross the state line in order to get an abortion. They may even have laws that are read in a way that even if an actual procedure of an abortion is not being performed in that state, it may be a crime to make a phone call from that state or to make payment from that state to another state. Now, importantly, yesterday, the Justice Department issued a statement where they said, in our view, that kind of law is unconstitutional. It would violate what we call the commerce law. It would inhibit the ability of people to cross state lines freely. And so the interesting thing to watch is if we start seeing these aggressive laws, will DOJ spring into action and challenge them in the courts? They certainly seem to be signaling that they will.
And what does the Supreme Court do with those kinds of cases? I mean, that'll be fascinating, obviously very important to watch as well. And in states that criminalize abortion, Elie, will prosecutors be prosecuting those cases? I mean, or do prosecutors have discretion as to which cases they pursue?
Yeah, Jim, this is such an important point. I want to make sure people understand this. Prosecutors are not robots. They are not supposed to be robots. It's not simply a matter of, well, there's a law in the book. We're prosecutors. We must prosecute it. No, your job as a prosecutor is to exercise what we call prosecutorial discretion. You have to ask questions like, is this law fair and just? Is this a good use of law enforcement resources? Does this reflect the community values that I represent? That answer may be yes for some people, no for others, but it's a question that prosecutors ask themselves all the time. And there are all sorts of laws on the books that prosecutors choose not to enforce. And here, I think a prosecutor has to be very practical. Am I going to prosecute and seek to lock up a doctor who performs an abortion, a nurse or nurse practitioner, a medical professional, potentially a woman who receives an abortion, a friend who drives that person? These are real questions. Different prosecutors are going to reach different results, but they have to be thinking about those things.
And Elie, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote a concurring opinion that obviously is getting a lot of attention, where he explicitly states that other precedents that relied on the same legal reasoning as Roe versus Wade might also be reconsidered. Can you tell us about those cases, because they are vitally important, in particular to the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, Jim, so there's a whole series of vital rights that all spring from the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause, including abortion, marital rights, contraception rights, sexual practice rights. In the majority opinion, Justice Alito said, we're overturning abortion, but we're not going to touch any of those other rights. Not everyone believes that, frankly. And Justice Thomas, as you said, Jim, said, actually, we should be reconsidering those rights relating to equality in marriage, contraception, sexual practice. Now, the dissent, of course, says we shouldn't be interfering with any of these existing rights. So the question is, where does the court go next? But watch for this, Jim. Justice Thomas's opinion is an invitation to states to pass new laws, for example, outlawing LGBTQ marriage, so that they can get it up to the Supreme Court to push this to the next level and challenge it. So we'll see if the justices are good for their word. We'll see if Alito's good for his word, that this is only abortion. We're not going to interfere with those other rights. But there will be, I believe, states passing laws that are designed and intended to challenge this. And that in itself could be difficult and problematic.
Right, and even though Justice Alito says, oh, we're just talking about abortion here, we should note that some of these justices went in front of the country during their testimony and talked about Roe versus Wade being established precedent and settled law and so on. And obviously, we couldn't count on those words holding up when Roe versus Wade came to their desk. All right, Ellie Honig, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who previously lobbied for Planned Parenthood in the Southeast. She's also a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, which just asked President Biden to declare a national emergency. Thank you, Congresswoman, for being with us. Today, the president did throw some cold water on the idea. I want to start with this first, of expanding the Supreme Court or getting rid of the filibuster. What are your thoughts on that? Does your caucus, do you want to go over to the White House and perhaps try to change the president's opinion on that?
So, Jim, thank you for covering this important conversation in our nation's history right now. As a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, I am but one member, and I know that the maternal mortality rates for Black women in Georgia are at the bottom of all 50 states. More Black women die within 1 year of childbirth in Georgia than in third world countries. So that's why I signed onto the letter with my congressional colleagues, CBC Women, to call to action the state of emergency that Black women will face as a result of this decision in Roe v. Wade being overturned. So what I know is that we have to do something to protect women, to give people the decision-making power, to get the care that they need when they need it. And so that's what we called on the president to do. This is a state of emergency for Black women in this country who are already in so many health disparities at the bottom of the list. So we have work to do, Jim, and I'm going to use everything at my resource as a member of Congress to make sure that I'm standing up for the people that I was sent to Washington to represent.
And I talked to one of your colleagues, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, in our last hour, and she said that she wonders whether lifetime terms for Supreme Court justices should be reconsidered. What did you think?
Well, Jim, it looks like we're shaking up a lot of precedent now because we just overturned Roe v. Wade, which was the law of the land for 50 years. And so I know my colleague Mondaire Jones has a bill to expand the courts so we are in 2022, and apparently things that we've been able to depend on for decades, centuries in this country are not the case anymore. So we have an opportunity to look at where we are right now in this time, and I think everything should be on the table because people's lives are at stake.
And on this discussion of precedent, after former President Barack Obama went on Twitter to criticize the Supreme Court for overturning the precedent of Roe versus Wade, Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas, perhaps you saw this, he replied, now do Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education. Of course, we should note, he later clarified to say, thank goodness some SCOTUS precedents are overruled. I guess his point is that sometimes precedent needs to be overruled, but I mean, what was your response when you saw that?
I mean, the fact that that's what he chose to bring up shows us exactly where we are in this country, where members of the Republican Party are. And when Clarence Thomas laid out the other things that he would consider overturning, like the right to contraception, the right for people to marry who they love in this country, even though he's in an interracial marriage, he didn't touch on the loving decision. But we have to look at these things that people are bringing up right now and realize that these issues are interlinked. This is an intersectional fight, and this is far from over. The people will have the final say when we show up at the ballot box, because we know that 68% of the people in Georgia, in the Deep South, don't agree with the decision that was made to overturn Roe v. Wade. So there's a lot of people left still to show up and raise their voices at the ballot box, and this is far from over. We're not going to back down, Jim.
And within hours of the Supreme Court decision, the state of Georgia, your state, officially asked an appeals court to reinstate the Georgia Life Act, better known as the heartbeat abortion law. It essentially bans abortion at 6 weeks. You fought against that law. What do you think? Is it coming back?
So this bill already passed the state legislature. I was unfortunately in the state Senate when it happened, and it was enjoined in the courts. And our attorney general and governor, who is running for re-election right now, they're on the ballot. They immediately reached out to the 11th Circuit so that this law could go into force. So what we know is that they are out of step with the people in Georgia. 68%, Jim, that's not 68% of Democrats. That's 68% of the people in the state do not agree with what they're doing, and they're going to have to answer to the voters. voters. And I'm ready to make sure that I'm organizing, mobilizing, and turning people out so that they know who's standing with them. And it's not Brian Kemp and his Republican Party.
All right, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, you were fired up today. We knew you would. Thanks very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. Coming up, a filmmaker who got extensive access to former President Donald Trump and his family before and after the 2020 election. It's emerging as a key witness for the January 6th committee. I'll speak to him next. You're live in the CNN Newsroom.
Usually, when we talk about iconic watches, we talk about watches from brands that were founded 100 or even 200 years ago. In 1999, French watchmaker Francois Paul Journe moved from France to Geneva and set up his own brand there. In the year 2000, he launched his first watch, and the sound everybody in the watch world heard were jaws hitting the floor. Inside every mechanical watch is a balance wheel, which swings back and forth and helps to keep the watch accurate. Inside Journe's watch, the chronomètre à résonance, are two balance wheels, and they swing back and forth, but in near perfect unison. They cost about $106,000 to around $110,000. But that's not much when you consider that you're getting one of the newest icons in the watch world.
All new Inside Africa. Go inside the inventive minds, evolving places, and creative trends of the Africa you need to know now. Ugandan tech pioneers create new ways of learning.
We envision a world where all children have equitable access to high-quality education.
Inside Africa on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
The data shows that the Caribbean and Latin America have some of the highest rates of sex crimes in the world, and sex crimes ties into human trafficking. My name is Jonathan Bagan. I'm based in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm an attorney at law and also chairman of the Caribbean Committee Against Sex Crimes. Say 10 years ago, it was said, even in my country, that nobody should speak out about human trafficking because they will come to get you, the mafia. Now that hundreds of people know about it and are speaking out against it, that darkness has been destroyed, and now we're bringing the issue into the light. Schools across Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, the students were really positive about it. They wrote poems, spoken word poems, they made videos.
I've risen and believed.
And those videos went on to the local media, onto the radio and television.
On arrival, you are forced into captivity and a life of servitude.
So the students were inspired to see their fellow students being connected to CNN International. A lot of kids now know the signs of human trafficking, what it is, and how to avoid it. So we may have saved some lives. My Freedom Day helped raise awareness, educate children, and I hope it inspires politicians and the governments across the region to do more to stop this crime from happening. It's impactful and important, and we hope to do even better next year.
We're here now at the home of one of the FSB team. And my name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
It's just been a chaotic scene here. People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
We were just in the hospital. It was shocking. Why do you think India has been hit so badly?
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
Why does a small group of women asking for their right to be educated threaten you so much?
Raise your hand if you love school.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
You can hear gunshots every couple minutes.
Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their story.
The January 6th committee says it will use footage from a forthcoming documentary that features interviews with former President Donald Trump and his adult children. That documentary, Unprecedented, is due to be released on Discovery Plus, which is owned by the same parent company as CNN. And the filmmaker has emerged as a key witness. Here's a clip.
They thought because people showed up to their rallies, that meant they were popular.
Because if you've never built something,
The idea that other people might be sitting at home feeling differently about it seems not to have occurred to them. They genuinely thought that must be true.
We won Georgia, we won Michigan, we won Pennsylvania, we won them all.
As the president has said, every single vote needs to be counted and needs to be heard, and he campaigned for the voiceless.
It's interesting to see Ivanka Trump say that her father wanted every vote to be counted, because Trump's mission in the days after the election was to stop the counting of votes.
The reality is, people in this country were getting multiple ballots in the mail. There are thousands and thousands of people who are voting in multiple states.
There's no evidence whatsoever that the voter fraud that they're claiming.
But after weeks of trying to overturn the results of the election, his legal team has come up with nothing.
So far, they've lost 30 cases. I would love to release all the information that I have. I would love to give it to you all. Except most of you wouldn't cover it.
All of the legal documents and everything else, it's not even a contest, but you still need a judge that has courage. And so far, we haven't found that judge.
And the filmmaker Alex Holder joins me now. Alex, you got this unbelievable access to Donald Trump and his inner circle. And I know that you had a chance to talk to the former president about some of his wild conspiracy theories about what happened in the 2020 election. That has not been made public up until this point. What did he talk about when you discussed this with him?
President Trump at the time was furious about the position that he found himself in. I'm now sitting across him in the diplomatic reception room in the White House, and he's looking at me directly in the eye, and he's saying that there was no way that guy, and he's referring to President Biden, got 80 million votes. And he starts talking to me how this thing would be very easily resolved. All he needs to do is signature verification. And he starts explaining how that should happen. And he goes, the reason why it's not happening is because the officials in Georgia were not brave enough to listen to him and open up these ballots and compare the signatures. And then he says that actually the reason why they're not doing it, aside from being not brave enough, he says they're stupid people. And he goes on about other conspiracies as well.
He said that about Kemp and Raffensperger.
Exactly.
Secretary, he said they were stupid.
He said they're stupid people. Yeah.
And when he goes, on this rant and talks about this stuff, I mean, do you push back? Do you say, hold on, none of this is true, this is bonkers?
So I think when, the Attorney General a few days earlier says that there was absolutely no evidence to support his claims, and the president still, a few days later, is telling me all these sort of crazy claims, the idea that I might persuade him is probably unlikely. So I let him have his piece. At the end of the day, my job in terms of the documentary is to record history and to record these moments. And this is a unique moment. This is a moment where the sitting president of the United States is sitting in the White House, looking me in the eye and telling me that he actually won the 2020 election, when in fact he didn't.
And you just gave us a brand new clip from the film that focuses on Donald Trump Jr. on the campaign trail. Let's take a look at that.
If you're a conservative, you don't just have to roll over and die because the other side would like you to. We have the option of fighting, and that's what America has seen from Donald Trump. So we need to fight back.
I'm doing this because I believe in it.
Donald Trump has opened the door for people who are willing to fight, to stand up for themselves. But now we gotta walk through it.
It's for my country, it's for our freedoms, it's for our liberties. I have 5 young children.
The economy is on the table. Your freedom of speech is on the table. Your Second Amendment is on the table.
I want them to grow up in an America that they recognize, and that's not what I'm seeing from the left.
So we need you out there. We need you mobilized. And when you do, we will make liberals cry again. Thank you, State College. Thank you, guys.
Whether my father was in this or not, I'd be vocal right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of questions. What are the big takeaways when it comes to the Trump children, the adult children in this film? And you obviously got this incredible access. How did you pull that off?
English charm. Perhaps.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's...
because this was a giant, I don't want to say secret, but not a lot of people knew that you were doing this.
Sure. I mean, we kept quiet throughout the process, but we weren't particularly, we weren't invisible. I mean, you can see from that, from the footage before. I mean, we were on the stage, we were very up close. We weren't trying to hide. I think people perhaps didn't know what we were doing because they didn't want to know, perhaps, or they didn't agree with what was going on, perhaps internally. But we were very visible, and we were doing what we were allowed to do. I mean, the series is about there's 2 narratives here. There's obviously the election campaign and the events that took place after the election and leading to January 6th. But there's also this succession type vibe, the differences between the three eldest Trump children and how they interact with each other and how they interact with their father. And you see these very interesting sort of similarities between the kids themselves and their father, but also the differences between them as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it played out like Succession.
Exactly.
Like the show Succession.
Exactly.
And let's take a look at another clip from the film where you asked Trump about January 6th.
Can we talk for a minute about January 6th?
Yeah. Well, it was a sad day, but it was a day where there was great anger in our country. The people went to Washington primarily because they were angry with an election that they think was rigged. A very small portion, as you know, went down to the Capitol, and then a very small portion of them went in. But I will tell you, they were angry from the standpoint of what happened in the election, because they're smart and they see and they saw what happened. And I believe that that was a big part of what happened on January 6th.
So he's still showing no remorse. Did you pick up on any remorse for what happened on January 6th?
No, and in fact, I think he's actually condoning the behavior of the people that went into the Capitol. I mean, to me, when he says that he thinks that those people that went into the Capitol went in because they thought that their election was stolen, well, where did they get that idea from?
They got it from him.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you had to meet with the January 6th committee.
Yeah.
Can you describe it all, how that went?
It was very professional.
Yeah.
It was.
What were they interested in? I guess I have to ask as a reporter.
Sure.
Yeah.
They were interested in all the material that they asked for. They had clearly considered the material beforehand. Their questions were very professional and direct, and I answered what they wanted. And it was a 2 hours and 1 minute meeting, and it was very straightforward.
And I have to ask you about this. You told Politico that Trump had this mysterious phone call with Russia's Vladimir Putin while he was campaigning in New England just 9 days before the election. What do you remember about that?
So all I know is that I was on Air Force One. We were meant to interview him on that day on Air Force One. And his chief of staff told us that it had to be rescheduled because he had a telephone call. And if my memory serves correctly, it was a telephone call with the president of Russia. And I remember thinking, that's a fair enough excuse to, reschedule the interview. But I have absolutely no more information whatsoever about that. And other reporters can come to their own conclusions and work out the timelines, etc.
But that stood out to you as being strange.
I mean, he's a world leader speaking to another world leader. Yeah. I didn't think it was particularly strange. I mean, to be honest, the entire experience was strange. I mean, I was on Air Force One.
Right. Well, and that was, I guess, one of the remarkable things about this is that here you are, a documentary filmmaker, not exactly a known quantity here in Washington or perhaps in the United States. You are now, of course. What did you think? I mean, just being in the middle of this, as the title of your documentary is called, Unprecedented, during this borderline insane time in our nation's history.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an extraordinary experience. I mean, from wall-to-wall coverage, multiple interviews. I mean, I'm a newbie to this, so am I doing okay so far?
So far, just fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Being subpoenaed to the biggest sort of political investigation probably since Watergate. Lots of print reporting. I mean, and now obviously I have security guards. So it's been a roller coaster in the last sort of less than a week, really. So,
did you think when you were filming all of this that this might end up in the hands of an investigation into what happened on January 6th?
No, not in a million years, no. I mean, I thought there was always going to be a historic importance in what we were capturing, purely because we had access to the president and his, and the first family. But to think that this situation would become a reality, I mean, no, never, no.
All right. Well, hopefully we can get you back. I know that there are other aspects of the documentary that are going to surprise the people when this finally comes out. Alex Holder, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Good to see you. A new video just into CNN showing abortion rights protesters being pepper sprayed in Eugene, Oregon. There it is right there during a demonstration that police say became rowdy and hostile. The event had been dubbed a night of rage after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Police say some in the crowd threw smoke bombs and water bottles at police officers. 10 people were ultimately arrested. Coming up, actor Sean Penn is helping Ukrainian fighter pilots for lobby for U.S. military aid. I sat down with him as he explains why that is so critical. That's coming up.
Going green in association with Kirloskar, Limitless.
Every week, we consume over 5 grams of plastic. I've just found a mere way to try and remove these from the environment and try and remove them from the environment such that we have less of them entering our food system and entering the environment in the first place. My name is Fionn Ferreira. I am 21 years old and I am a student of chemistry at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. Now, more than ever, young people are in a place of power. We're seeing more and more young scientists getting taken seriously, their grassroots idea being scaled. And we're also seeing just more and more young people who are passionate about this problem. We, however, have to remember that while only 25% of the global population is youth, they are 100% of the global future.
So much of business travel now is mixed with leisure. People are working from abroad. But yes, certainly the consulting trips, the Monday through Thursday, they are back and happening. Consultants are back on the road, engineers who need to do those factory visits, people in sales. So it's not quite off a cliff like people thought. But I think especially once that testing requirement is lifted and, I think businesses will feel more comfortable sending people out. But it will come back, but it'll just look a little bit different than what it used to. Whenever that testing requirement's lifted, we're going to see a shoot up in demand, especially international. And we're projecting at the Point Sky that airfare is going to continue rising steadily into June. It might taper off, but, we'll see. But in general, booking last minute is not a smart bet in 2022.
I'm Nick Watt in Los Angeles, and this is CNN.
Mainland China tolerates no signs of dissent whatsoever.
Are you anticipating dozens of people being prosecuted? Hundreds? Thousands?
Stories of mass internment camps have been trickling out.
Do you think you'll see your husband again?
This period of mourning is taking place in a real climate of fear. The humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in front of our eyes here.
This is one of the cells? Come on in here.
We're flying over ISIS front lines. This is the only protection we have. Nerves are still very much on edge. Firefighters have been battling this blaze for weeks. What do you say to people who question climate change?
We need to do something now.
Ivan Watson, CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
There's a new bipartisan bill being put forth in Congress to train Ukrainian pilots on U.S.-made fighter jets and other military hardware that could give it an edge in defending itself against devastating Russian attacks. Congressman Adam Kinzinger says the training could happen as the Biden administration weighs sending those jets to Ukraine. This week, I sat down with actor Sean Penn, who is in Washington, urging lawmakers to meet with two of Ukraine's top Air Force pilots who have been pushing to get more military aircraft for Ukraine. Here's why Sean Penn said that aid is so critical.
The ask is not a big, grand ask. It's a very practical ask to be able to match the air technology of the Russian fighters. At this point, they're flying the equivalent of suicide missions, and all they need is the most basic kind of support from the American government.
Sean, you hear all the conversations that take place here in Washington. People here in Washington are worried about escalating things. What do you say to that? If we give them this assistance, it will escalate the war, maybe drag the United States in.
Yeah, I'm not a believer in that philosophy of thought. I think that it's very clear that if we had announced what we were going to do, that we have done in support of Ukraine to this date, that would also have been considered a wild escalation. This is going to take its natural course. The unnatural course are the amount of people we're letting die every day and the amount of destruction that we're letting happen in Ukraine every single day that we put off the inevitable. The inevitable is not nuclear war. The inevitable is that the Ukrainians will win this war, and if they are given the equipment today, you had asked a question having to do with how long does it take. How long it takes is that from the day that these aircraft are delivered to the Ukrainian military, you're going to be, for 4 months from that day, they're going to be in the air fighting this war.
And joining me now are the two Ukrainian Air Force pilots who go by the call signs Moonfish and Juice, which we are using today to protect their identities. Of course, you can also see they're all wearing their masks. We all met earlier this week alongside Sean Penn, as you saw in that video. Gentlemen, thank you very much, Moonfish and Juice, for being with me. You're kind of like Ukraine's Top Gun pilots, right? But you don't have the best technology.
Yeah, it is correct.
And what would that do in terms of making a difference for you in defending Ukraine and defending your people?
Well, if we're talking about air-to-air superiority, so basically the Russians have obvious technical advantages over our fighter jets, and we not believe the numbers say that providing us with U.S.-made fighter jets would make us at least matching them, or I believe even more advanced. On the other hand, providing those jets is also, we see it as a very important thing to protect Ukraine from further escalation from Russia. We think that those are the tools that make Russia do not invade again.
And Juice, you're talking about using these American-made fighter jets, if you can get them, to defend civilian targets, places like hospitals and schools that are being hit with missiles.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of the greatest problems for our defense, and actually air defense, is to prevent missile strikes, actually cruise missiles. And it's a very difficult target for both for ground-based air defense and for fighter jets. So our need is to defend our cities against this threat. Unfortunately, Russians are attacking not only the military bases, the military objects, but also civilian infrastructure. And actually, last night they launched 51 cruise missiles in our cities in the north part and western part of Ukraine. And we intercepted just 4 of them. It's a pretty critical number, and we need to save much more lives, much more objects of our civilian and military infrastructure. That's why we need a capability to do this pretty difficult mission from the ground and from the air, using good radars and good missiles.
And Moonfish, we have some video that we can show our viewers right now of a missile strike in Mykolaiv. Let's watch this. This is what you're up against.
Yes, it is correct. And sir, if other than pushing for the jets, when we were talking to the U.S. lawmakers and to the media, what we were asking for are the ground-based air defenses. There would be much, it is a little simpler but effective boost to the Ukrainian air defense. As you can see clearly, Russians not only hitting military targets, but they're hitting civilian targets like bridges. I think we saw the gas station on that footage. They're targeting grain silos, and the ground-based air defense will save civilian lives from the moment it is on the ground in Ukraine. Plus, the training is less
and maintenance.
Maintenance is easier. And if you think about more globally, they will be protecting the food supplies, because we know that Russians are blocking our ports, and we have these piles of grain staying not able to be delivered to the countries that need.
And that affects everything. That affects the global market. And Juice, you guys came all the way from Ukraine to the nation's capital here in Washington to make this appeal. Do you go back home optimistic? And what were those conversations like? Do you feel like you made some progress?
Yeah, absolutely. And we think that it would help. Actually, it would help, because now the lawmakers and the experts in Pentagon, they understand much more detailed problems of Ukrainian Air Force, and they could not only see the list, just a formal list of needs, of requirements, but now they know a real stories, a real experience from our side, and they saw the faces of this war actually. So I think it is pretty productive.
All right.
Plus, from what we understand, after speaking to them, it seems like we are on the same page.
Okay, very good. Moonfish and Juice, thank you very much for your time. We know you are Ukraine's version of Top Gun, so thank you so much. Best of luck going back to Ukraine. We know you go right back to work.
It is correct.
So Godspeed. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you. And we're so grateful to them. And this just in, you're looking at live pictures right now. President Biden arriving in Germany for the G7, the war in Ukraine, among the many challenges that he'll have to tackle. We'll get a live report on that next.
We share this place, we all belong.
our mission here at CNN and of journalists. The news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster.
More breaking news that we are following right now.
You really work as hard as you can getting the facts.
We're learning more about an alleged plot.
It is critically important.
To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news.
You're looking at live pictures of President Biden arriving in Munich ahead of the G7 summit. He's got a lot on his agenda to talk about, including the war in Ukraine and the impact on the global economy. CNN's MJ Lee is with the president overseas. MJ, talk to us about this, what we're seeing right now in this welcome ceremony for the president.
Yeah, the president just touched down here to begin this the series of two major global summits. The first one is going to be the G7 in Germany, and then we are going to see him go to Spain for the NATO summit. So he's being welcomed here on the tarmac, I believe is the images that you are showing at the moment, after a very consequential week in Washington, as we were talking about in the last hour. And you are absolutely right that the war in Ukraine is going to loom so large over both of these global summits, and the president is going to have a big task ahead of him. And one of those things, of course, is to try to maintain this united front between the U.S. and its allies against Russian aggression that continues in this war in Ukraine. And one of the things that U.S. officials previewing this trip has said, they have said that they are going to be seeing and announcing new steps to put the pressure on Russia. We don't know exactly what all of those steps will be, but one thing that we learned today is that there is going to be an announcement of an import ban of new gold coming in from Russia. So one way in which we're going to see these countries try to sort of ratchet up the pressure on Russia. We have, of course, over the course of the last couple of months, seen these countries roll out sanctions, roll out various kinds of economic punishment for Russia. So that is going to be a theme that we are going to continue seeing. Another highlight is going to be a virtual address from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This is just one more sign, of course, that these global leaders are wanting to give that kind of spotlight to the Ukrainian president, as he has continuously called on allies to continue providing aid that his country needs as they continue to fight back against the Russian aggression. Now, you mentioned that another big theme is going to be the economic strain that the war has continued to put on the global economy. Back at home, as we have discussed so much over the last couple of months, we are seeing a country that is fighting inflation. The president, of course, has taken on that challenge, and it has been a very difficult challenge for him. So that is going to be a big part of the discussion for the president and the other global leaders that he will be meeting with, both at the G7 and the NATO summit as well. Jim.
All right, MJ Lee, and of course, domestic politics, as it often happens on some of these foreign trips, will be hanging over the president. He's going to be asked, I would imagine, on a number of occasions when there are moments with the press about what happened with Roe versus Wade being overturned at the Supreme Court. MJ Lee, thanks so much, as we're watching some live images here of President Biden getting a proper German welcome there in Munich. We'll stay on top of this and bring you any updates. We'll be right back.
All new African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Pro athletes set up sports academies to elevate young players.
The Uprise is the avenue to get as many people as possible the opportunities that they ordinarily wouldn't have had.
African Voices Changemakers, only on CNN in association with Glow.
Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. Over on that way. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces. There has been a ferocious battle here. There's unexploded grenades everywhere. We're being shown the powerful American guns, giving them an edge. You downplayed the US intelligence assessments. Do you now regret that? I'm in Kiev right now, and it is under attack, Mr. Lavrov, from Russian forces. I'm being told by our security that we need to get our flak jackets on. No matter where you are in this country, lives are being shattered. There are thousands streaming out. It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
I'm James Roby. I'm the Global Head of Environmental Sustainability at Capgemini. People often ask, why should businesses care about sustainability? Well, first of all, quite frankly, an unsustainable pathway is not going to be good for any business. Businesses are reliant on having consumers that will buy from them. They're reliant on having employees who want to work for them. Increasingly, all the stakeholders of the business are asking difficult questions. So businesses which aren't taking sustainability seriously essentially are going to be out of business. But in reality, it's never too late to start. A great way to start is by trying to understand your own impacts as an organisation. Perhaps calculate your carbon footprint. Ultimately, we need everybody on this journey, so why not start today?
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
I'm David Culver in Beijing, and this is CNN.
Sunday on CNN. In a year full of challenges, let's salute those going the extra mile, using their platforms for good. CNN Heroes Salutes, hosted by Erin Burnett. Sunday.
You may know Arthur Ashe as a legendary tennis champion, the first black man to win the singles title in Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, and the Australian Open, but his legacy goes far beyond the court. Here's a preview of the CNN film, Citizen Ashe.
He had evolved from someone who was analytical to someone who became more and more about direct action.